First of all, thank you, Rob, for your time to travel to Mexico to have this conversation. I know your agenda it's pretty busy in Washington and all around. There are many questions around what is happening in the ecosystem and on AI and open source and regulation and many, many, many things. I would like to start with, a big question, and then we can go in deep in different things. But I mean, I think that, the simple question is, what's the stage right now of this open source AI in the world and maybe in the region? And then with that, we can go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a very big question. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here and for this conversation. And I saw the slogan for the conference is "The future is being written today." And I really think that is true in general, but particularly when it comes to AI and open source AI. One of the things that I think is particularly notable about the moment that we're in is, we just heard in the previous panel about the role that AI is playing in revolutionizing so many industries and so many economies. And for all of the disruption that we've experienced to date, one of the things that I think is really exciting about this moment is it's all about to change again. And what I mean by that is we're used to having AI that's able to scale, to take information that people are giving it in natural language, to scale the ability for me as an individual to do things that I couldn't do by myself. But at the same time, AI has largely been a very static tool. Everybody gets the same AI. And what I think is really powerful about the moment that we're heading into is that AI is going to become personal. AI is going to become something that you can have as an individual or as a business that serves your needs specifically. And that's true for AI in general, particularly when it comes to open source and why we've invested so much in open source, not just recently, but over 10 plus years that we've been doing this, is we believe that open source is a technology, is an approach that actually is empowering for everybody, that brings everybody together into an ecosystem so that we can build together and have everybody gain the benefits of this technology. So what I mean by that is by making this technology openly available, whether that's our large language model, Llama, we have computer vision models that we've open sourced. We've open sourced something called No Language Left Behind, which helps with machine translation, particularly valuable for low resource languages that don't have humans who can build translators. It's just so powerful because it takes that technology that really only a few organizations in the world have the capability to build and puts it in the hands of developers everywhere. And so what that means is, if you're a government here in Mexico, the government has been using Llama, our large language model, to build a chatbot to help with tourism or to help people get access to government services. And that's a really powerful thing. For me personally, these glasses that I'm wearing now are smart glasses. They look a lot like normal glasses, but actually they can take photos. But maybe more importantly, they have a bunch of AI-enabled functionality that really helps people in their daily lives. Yeah. And so what that means is if I'm hard of hearing, I can get amplification and have information and have what you're saying amplified for me so I can hear it. When I was in the airport, I'm not a great Spanish speaker. When I was in the airport, I was able to use the glasses and they could hear what people were saying in Spanish and translate it to me in English. And that's just very rudimentary for what AI can accomplish. So I think the headline point right now is that we're at this big inflection point where we're moving from having a world-changing, economy-changing technology that we can all use to one that actually works for us.
Very, very quick, and just to understand, we're talking about open source, but what's the other option, or what's the risk on the other option?
Well, I've always been a proponent of multiple approaches to these things. I don't think there's one approach that is the only one that makes sense. I would never say open source is the only approach and anything else is bad. I do think that there are choices and different approaches to release make sense in different contexts. So for example, open source has been really powerful for people that want to build technology build AI on a smartphone or on a pair of glasses or some on a device where they don't have a lot of compute. They want to fine tune the AI to do what they want and be able to deploy it in a way that doesn't require a lot of computing power. That's going to be, and I think that's really powerful because it really does democratize the technology and make it possible for lots of people to build things. They don't have to ask for Meta's permission to use our AI. And if they change their mind tomorrow and don't want to use our AI, they want to use somebody else's, they can do that too. And so it gives governments and people and developers a lot of freedom and a lot of autonomy to decide what they want to build. Yeah. Now, there are other cases where that's not going to make sense. So for example, with a really, really large model, there are some models that are just so compute intensive that they require sort of nation level or multinational corporation level computing resources. And so they're not going to be useful for an everyday developer. And so open sourcing may make less sense in that context. And so you've seen some other companies say, well, we're not going to open source our technology, but we're going to give you an API, which is essentially a language that the computers can speak to each other. So you can use our AI without actually having it. And sometimes that works. But it does mean that there's less autonomy. It also has some privacy implications because it means if you're taking your data and sending it through somebody else's system, they can potentially see what you're doing. And then, of course, there's the third option. You and I normally in our lives are never going to touch an open source model or an API. Those are for developers. So the way that we're going to interact with AI is actually a totally different paradigm. Yeah. And so it might be that I'm going to interact with AI on my glasses. I can ask questions about today's agenda, for example, to my glasses if that's what I want to do, or ask for help navigating as I'm going around the conference. That's something that I might want to do in the future. AI will be enabled in lots of different contexts. People use it all the time on Facebook and Instagram, for example, to get more information about the content they're seeing. So somebody sends you a post and you want to know, is this real? Is this, does this have, can you find other examples where somebody's talked about this? And so it's embedded in all of our products. Another thing that I think is really exciting and that is, couple of 3-4 days old at this point, we just announced a new tool called Business AI. And so this is not open source. This is using our open source model, but it's basically a concierge that businesses can use to help people navigate their products. And so we heard on the last panel about how AI is helping revolutionize businesses across so many different industries. And what this does is essentially a concierge that helps you as a business owner rival the capabilities that a large business might have. So you can tell the AI what you want to do. Here are my products. Here's what I want people to buy. You can have the AI answer customer service questions for you. You don't have to hire 100 or thousands of people to do customer support for you. So those things are really powerful. But I think, again, the point is, open source is a really important tool and I think a really valuable component. And the fact that actually, over the past couple of years, people have moved from being kind of skeptical of open source to pretty uniformly understanding that it's really important for the future and that lots of other companies have decided to open source their models as well, I think is a real success.
Rob, we discussed before the panel that we don't know in 5 years or even more, 10 years, what this technology can bring for humanity or countries. It's developing so fast that it's hard to imagine, even in 2 years, right? The capacity of a cell phone, the capacity of the video, AI, whatever. But you as a company, you need to bet on something to happen, right? Even when you don't know what will be the end result, you're betting on something. And I think you mentioned something that serves for your needs, right? But what's the vision and what's the bet on the short term, long term?
Yeah, so short term, I actually think now's a good time to look at the announcements that we've just made over the past couple of weeks. So we announced these glasses. So these are our Oakley Meta AI glasses, but also, we announced what are called Meta Ray-Ban display glasses. And so these are glasses that actually have a display in them so that you can, as you're talking and going about your day, get context on what's going on in the world. So again,
in the glass?
In the glass, like
okay.
In the lens.
Yeah.
And then there's a neural band that sits on your wrist and allows you to just make a gesture like this to navigate. And so instead of having to be out of your normal life and everybody, focused on their phones all day, you can actually get information that supplements your life, and that helps you navigate to get where you're going, to communicate with somebody that you need to communicate with quickly, whatever it is, and do it in a way that's integrated into real life rather than disruptive from it. So that's one big bet. Another big bet is the business technology that I talked about. I think increasingly we're going to see a world where the largest businesses in the world lose their advantage. And what I mean by that is small businesses are going to be able to use AI to do things that previously cost a lot of money and previously required a lot of people. These are things that people are going to be, that small businesses are going to be able to do, and they're going to be able to compete with the largest organizations in the world. And so you've seen these kind of technologies already announced and sort of already available for people to use. And I think that's really exciting. But I mean, you alluded to sort of the personal aspect of it. We've been pretty public, and our founder, Mark Zuckerberg, has been really explicit about his vision being one of personal superintelligence. And so
Personal superintelligence.
And so I'll unpack what that means. But when you think about AI, most of us think about AI chatbots, and you can, ask it questions and get responses. And like I said earlier, one of the challenges is that we all have to use the same technology. And so what if the AI could be both really capable, more capable than an average human at doing certain tasks? And what if it could do it in a way that's personalized to you, that actually meets your needs as an individual that are going to be very different from what I need? So for example, what if you're looking for a job? What if you could have a career coach that understands all of the latest scholarship on entrepreneurship and in business and on how to get a job, and then uses that to give you personalized coaching on your resume? What if you are a biomedical researcher? What if you could have AI that's capable of looking at medical screenings and finding cancer cells much more quickly and at scale than an individual radiologist could? It's not going to necessarily take away the need for those people, but it's going to make their lives so much more easy. And the stuff that is typically hard, where you don't, I can't just call up the world's foremost career coach and get information, get feedback on my resume. But if I had the ability to ask the AI to do that, and I would get the best, most personalized guidance, I think that's really powerful.
Let's talk a little bit about countries or regions and let's say adapters and developers, right? We have been in different moments in history that a new technology comes, and there are developers of that technology and there are adapters of that technology. I see Mexico more in the adapters of AI, not probably building the largest companies of AI, but building hundreds of companies that use AI in order to be more efficient in different things, right? But I think the competition right now, it's everybody. Everybody wants to be a developer, right? The innovator, let's say, and nobody probably wants just to be that tropicalization, let's say. Do you see that happening, and strategies to be effective on those strategies?
Sure. So I think one of the things that's maybe uniquely true about AI at this moment is it's a very diverse ecosystem with a lot of different players. So typically when we talk about the companies that are building AI, we're talking about companies like mine that build what we call foundation models. We build the core technology, the core models that are able to process language and generate outputs. And that's an important piece of the puzzle, but there's also lots of other people that are participating in this. So, for example, there are companies that build data sets to train these models. One of the challenges is if you don't have data sets from cultures around the world and languages around the world, the models aren't going to be any good at serving people. So if we trained our AI only on data from the United States, and we didn't train it on any data from Mexico or Canada, then people in Mexico and Canada would not be well served by the technology that we're building. And so there's a lot of work in individual countries to build native data sets that help make sure the technology serves them. There's a bunch of work around, AI is still a very human focused technology in the sense that it needs humans to help train it and tune it. And so there's a bunch of work there. Once the model is built, there are people that have to test it. Once the model is built, then it goes to typically a separate company that's developer that takes that model off the shelf and then builds it into something that you and I can use. And so there's all of it, and then there's cloud service providers that are doing that. And so there are different roles that different people in the ecosystem are playing. The way that we've seen, and again, we're still, like I said, early in the development of this technology, but with Llama, we've certainly seen Mexico in sort of the user in the user role. I mean, Mexico is sort of consistently one of our highest adoption markets when we look at this kind of technology. But we also see really fast adoption by developers who are taking the foundation technology and building it into consumer products and services, and also business products and services. And so I think there's a real sweet spot there to be taking some of the technology that a small number of companies are building and really deploying it in ways that are extremely powerful.
Are you seeing a big difference between countries that are, let's say, on the high end demographics? I mean, a country like Japan, right? I think the average or median age in Japan is, I don't know, 48 years old. And in Latin America, it's 26, 27. Are they better adapters, let's say, than Japan?
It's an interesting question. I'm not sure off the top of my head sort of what the geographic differences are and what you'd attribute it to. I think it's still probably too early to know because we're still in the process of taking this technology and rolling it out. I mean, I will say, I think we've been really pleasantly surprised demographically at the range of ages of people that have been using our technology. I mean, in a lot of ways, it is an equalizer, right? And rather than we traditionally think of younger generations as the ones that are most technologically literate. And one of the cool things about AI is that you actually don't need to have a technical background to use it powerfully. In fact, a lot of the engineers at our company are using AI to do coding because it's just more efficient.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really powerful piece. I mean, I do see one of the places where we do see gaps, and I think this came up in the last session as well, is regulatory differences in different places. I won't repeat what was said about the European setup around AI regulation, other than to sort of agree that it's set up in a way that makes it very hard for us to deploy novel technologies there quickly. And so when you think about, what you want to be as a digital native country, and if you're a government trying to set up policies, broadly the things that our company or any company needs are talent, data, and infrastructure. And those are the sort of critical pieces to enabling it. And so I think the countries that are thinking ahead on this are thinking about those three areas. I mean, I know, for example, here in Mexico, President Sheinbaum has been, I think, really vocal about wanting to be on the front end of AI and building the Ministry for Science, Technology, and Innovation, and really making it a government focus, I think, is a really important signal. And so now the work is, what does it look like to build in those three areas? How do we make sure that we have, Mexican data and Canadian data and American data that are used to build these models? How do we make sure that we build infrastructure so that everyone everywhere can use them? And how do we make sure that we upskill our talent pool so that people are able to take maximum advantage?
Sorry that I cannot keep watching your glasses, and I feel so less sophisticated with mine here. I feel you're reading in your class. I feel that you're recording me, or I don't know if you're translating me to another language behind your head.
Well, I've just turned on the record. I've not been recording here, but I did just start recording. You can actually see. I don't know if people in the audience can see the light is blinking, so it's very obvious when I'm recording.
Take pictures.
There you go. I'm going to memorialize this moment for myself. But no, I do think it's really powerful to have this. And as I've gotten to use it, it's no longer kind of a novelty. It's just sort of a tool that I use in my daily life. And I think
but it's going to be a huge advantage. I mean, I imagine one kid having that in school and another kid not having that tool, and maybe translating or maybe recording the class, or maybe, I don't know, making calculations in his head. So it is obviously an equalizer, but at the same time could be for those who don't have the tools, and that's why it's so relevant, it's open source and really to everyone. And let me move a little bit on personal safety and then probably to national security. But on a regular basis, personal safety, I think, I mean, for those who have kids, watching the screens and, connecting and communicating with their friends through platforms and now through AI or watching videos being created by AI. So what are those things that you are worried about, but also optimistic about?
So I think I won't surprise you to know that this is something I spend a huge amount of time, and a lot of us at the company spend a huge amount of time thinking about. And I think it's something that we as a society need to think about too. We've talked about a lot of ways that AI is changing the way that we interact. And I think there are, positive aspects of that and negative aspects. On the positive side, I think AI is the single technology that has helped us as a company keep the world safe. Just recently, I think it was publicly disclosed that we used AI to detect somebody who had threatened to shoot to do a school shooting.
Yeah.
And we were able to detect that, and through the use of AI. That was escalated to humans who looked at it and realized it was a credible threat, and were able to report it to law enforcement in the United States and stop the attack. Yeah. And so that's just something that at the scale that we operate at, we would never be able to do without the use of AI. On the flip side, I think there's a lot that's rightly been discussed around, the power that AI gives you to get those kinds of personal responses and personal information that's tailored to you. And so one of the things that we've been doing both ourselves and then with a lot of experts outside the company is thinking about what are the right guardrails for how AI should behave? What should they be allowed to say and not allowed to say? What should people be able to ask them to do? And I think that's a thing that's going to evolve quite a lot as the technology evolves. But it's something that we are thinking about, and particularly, in the way that we've thought about it, differentiating between the way that an adult might use AI versus a way that a child might use AI. And so, I have a 11-year-old and a 14-year-old daughter. My 14-year-old daughter's on Instagram, and she actually really likes using AI, but the kinds of things that I expect her to want to use it for, and that I think are appropriate and really help socially, helpful to her emotional development, are different than what I would use it for. And so I think being age aware, making sure that we're thinking about those things, and that we're also over time building more parental controls so that parents can be in control of the right experience for their kids is going to be critically important.
Yeah. So let's move to national security. It's very hard to understand what is happening in a country like China or Russia on AI. And so what's the global stage on AI, and what should we know at the highest level?
Yeah. So I think it's something that, we certainly think about. I know that the U.S. government is quite aware of the geopolitical competition between, the Americas. And then if we think about China as an example, China's put a lot of resources into competing on AI and to building advanced AI technology. And they explicitly, I think of it as a technology that can help them spread their influence globally. And so it's a choice, when we think about both, we talked earlier about the policies that we might adopt for, how to regulate AI, how to enable it or how to disable it. And part of the thinking that has to go into that is how much do we want to enable, countries like Canada and Mexico and the US to be successful in the global AI race, and how much do we want countries like China to do that maybe aren't going to be as constraining or that see a strategic advantage in competing. I guess I would say, the Chinese labs particularly are doing very well. They're building really sophisticated technology. And so it does require a lot of focus from us and from our governments to be thinking about the geopolitical competition in a way that's sophisticated and thoughtful. At the same time, we also need to be cautious as we're building the technology about the national security risks of what the technology we're building could do, either because somebody might use it inappropriately or use it in a harmful way, or because it can capabilities that we're not intending. And so we do a lot internally also we've built a bunch of evaluations that actually, we talked earlier about open source, that we've also open sourced our cybersecurity evaluations. We've open sourced a bunch of tools that people can use when they are taking, whether it's Llama or any other open source model, and using it to make sure that even if you as a small developer might not have national security expertise or cybersecurity expertise, you can run these evaluations and try to get some sense of whether the technology that you're building is susceptible to any kind of attack.
Rob, what can you do specifically in Latin America? I think, I mean, even internet, or I don't know, maybe even electricity. There are, some millions in Latin America that they don't have access to that old technology, right? I think I heard in the World Economic Forum that something around 50 million people in Latin America don't have access to internet, regular, right? So they don't connect in just 1 week, 2 weeks, because they don't have that access. How can we use the new technologies, AI, to do that leapfrog? I mean, if we don't do the leapfrog, they're gonna be always behind.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, I've talked earlier about some of the most advanced technology, these glasses and things like that, and people don't have regular internet access, are not going to be the consumers for these glasses. But one of the things that we've been really quite focused on is thinking about how this technology can be available to everyone. And so partially that means open sourcing, but another thing that we've really focused on is building AI access into WhatsApp. So, even people, and as you know, WhatsApp is very widely used in Latin America. And even the people that don't have regular access to a computer, regular access to an internet connection, do have the ability to text. And so building Meta AI and sort of the most advanced capabilities that we're building, you can access them on your glasses, but you can also access them on your WhatsApp. And I think that is a really important step, that we're not just building for the high-end devices, but we're building for everyone. And candidly, the hope in us promoting open source is that we're not going to be the only ones. So I think I'm gratified to see that lots of other companies that are in the AI space have been building for the long tail of not just sort of a small number of wealthy households, but everybody. And over the past couple of years, global governments have gotten together at these, we call them AI summits. So there was one in Korea, there's one in Paris, there's one in the UK. The next one is in England. And this is one of the big focuses that they are going to have, is thinking about the global south and thinking about AI as a tool for enablement and empowerment. And how can we take this technology and use it in a way that lifts everybody up? So that's something we're very invested in, but also really happy to see that that's something global governments care about too.
Rob, last question, and this is about the region. This is the North Capital Forum. Obviously, we're worried about the future of the trilateral relationship, U.S., Mexico, and Canada. And I want to ask you about how can we use these technologies, AI in particular, to understand each other better. I always say that lack of understanding sometimes is lack of knowledge. It's in both ways, right? In the U.S., probably they don't understand Mexico quite well. Maybe because they don't know Mexico, they never traveled to Mexico. Same way here to the U.S. or to Canada. How can we use technology in a I don't know, diplomacy, culturally, sports-wise, and every single aspect of the relationship to improve the relationship?
It's a big question. I'm probably not the best person to solve, how to improve the relationship. I will say something. I live in the United States. I've spent time here in Mexico. I've also spent a bunch of time in Canada. And something I hear pretty consistently from leaders of all of those, from each of those countries, is an investment in the North American relationship and in the relationship with those countries as neighbors. And so I think there's a lot of desire, at least I hear a lot of desire to build those bridges. Some of the bridges that need to be built are cultural, right? And so it's not actually it's not actually an economic or a policy-driven thing as much as just understanding your neighbor. We've been trying to do, some work along these lines on our platform. So, for example, on Instagram, if I post a reel that's in Spanish and you don't speak Spanish but you speak English, you'll have the ability to actually have it auto dubbed into your language. And if somebody else speaks French because they live in Quebec, then they can have it dubbed into French automatically without the creator having to redo it. And so the idea there is you take a set of content and cultural context around the content that is really separated into language groups, right? People who speak French, people who speak Spanish, people who speak English, and make it accessible across borders. And I think, we talk about the Tower of Babel and, these kinds of ideas of what if you could break down language barriers. And I think for the first time, we're actually at a place where this technology could help with that, much less I talked about the low resource languages and the long tail earlier. I think there's real promise in AI to do that.
The forecast is that the U.S. will become the largest Spanish-speaking country in the world in maybe 10 years. Right now, it's, I think, 70 million people in the U.S. speak Spanish. Obviously, Mexico is the largest one with 130, but that's changing very, very fast. We have the World Cup next year,
yes,
the Trilateral World Cup, and we have a huge review of the largest institution in North America, that is the USMCA. So we're going to try to use those platforms to revamp the relationship and to stay as the most competitive region in the world. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for your time. Thank you for Meta. Meta has been very generous as a sponsor in this conference for 4 years now. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.